Okay, folks, welcome to the expository say-do section of quest number 2. Hopefully you watched the building background video about the 9/11 memorial. I had you watch that because we're actually going to be reading an article about the 9/11 memorial, and the video was going to give you some background about what the site of the 9/11 attacks meant to people who were alive when it happened. You may have been alive, but you were probably very young, and the news footage would probably give you some context and help you understand why, as a nation, it was important for all of us to have the 9/11 attacks memorialized and something to celebrate and remember the people who were killed during those attacks. So I hope that you watched it. If not, go back and watch it in the blend space, and then we'll get going with the article. This is the article that we're going to read. If you have not already done so, go into your Schoology course and print out a copy of the article so that you can jot down your summary and what the author is doing in the margins. Before you go on with me, I will ask you to read the entire article through one time by yourself. And then I'm going to get you started on the summary, and then you're going to do the rest of the summary alone, and then we'll do the whole do section together. So if you haven't done so already, go back to Schoology, print the article, and read it through all by yourself one time. Okay, folks, hopefully you read through the article one time by yourself. And what I'm going to ask you to do first time out is go through and summarize the article in the left-hand column. I'm going to start you out with the first section, but then I want you to summarize the rest by yourself. So here we go with the first section. I have summarized it, and it's going to pop up all by itself magically. Here we go. Okay, so I know that you went through and read the whole thing already, so we're just going to get right to the summary. I condensed this whole beginning section, this long section, into just basically 2 sentences. The 9/11 memorial no longer requires tickets. There was no official announcement. The news was spread by social media. The author actually said that basic thing a few times in a row in a couple different ways, but the information boils down to this. So what I would like you to do right now is pause the video and go through and summarize the rest of the article on your own, and then join me again because we're going to work through the do section together. So pause, summarize, and then come back. All right, I hope that you paused and summarized on your own. I'm actually not going to give you the answers for the rest of the summary. You'll have to check with your teacher for that, but I am going to work through the do section with you. So we'll start right here at the beginning, and the author does a few different things right here at the beginning. So just very simply, right at the beginning, the author states the new 9/11 museum policy using really simple language. Remember, this is not a fancy literary nonfiction text. This is just communicating information to us, so the author's not using terribly exciting language necessarily. And then in the rest of this section, the author just expands on the policy change by sharing some details. We get the time that the memorial and the museum will be open, and we get how the people actually ended up getting the information and that they're no longer standing out in the rain and that kind of thing. So the author just kind of expands with some details. Then we move on to this next section called The Keepers of 9/11. And down here in this section, the author does a couple different things. So let's look at what they are. First off, the author cites an expert to illustrate how the opening of the memorial makes people feel. So you'll see this a lot, especially in newspaper articles. Somebody who knows a lot about the topic will be interviewed, and then their words will be included in a quote. So this person, Michael Arid, of I guess one of the architects who designed the memorial, is talking about how gratifying it is to see all the people going into the site, and it talks about how it makes him feel. And then the author explains how the procedures have changed over time. So it used to be that people would just come to the construction site, and that's something that you saw in the video where the people were creating the viewing tower so that they could just watch as the destruction and all of the debris was hauled away. And now that the museum is going to open, the memorial is open as well. And the author just shares that information pretty simply. Right here in this section, the author gives an example to show how easy it is to get into the memorial. So we get this person, Paul Gunther, who goes in wearing a backpack and thinking he's going to run into all kinds of security, but instead he just walks right through, and they kind of remind him, hey, your bag's open, just as like a nice reminder, like, hey, your stuff might fall out. So instead of them going through the bag, which is what he expected, is just this really easy way to come in. Down here, we get to a graphic that is included, and the author is using a visual just to show the popularity of the memorial. So we have a graph that shows, starting in September 2011 up until the present, that 19 million visitors have come, and attendance is steadily rising over the course of those years. And then this piece over here shows where in the world people are coming from. So we look at the scale down at the bottom. The lighter percentages are lower numbers, and then the higher percentages, it gets darker. So we see United States and South America and Australia really have the most people coming to visit the museum, and then in some of these other continents, attendance is a little bit lower. And then down in this section, the author states that the crowds are not to everyone's liking because it's getting really busy, and then quotes a local to illustrate the claim that not everyone likes the crowd. So he says not everybody likes it, and then this is a quote from somebody who doesn't like it. So the author includes that example. It's almost like the author's text evidence. Like when you write a short answer, you say something and include evidence. The author's doing that in this article. And then at the bottom, he describes this person was not part of the attack. He was driving a patrol truck and got injured during the 9/11 attack, and the author kind of brings us back to remember how serious the event is that's being memorialized, but then transitions in contrast by interviewing one of the architects, and the architect talks about the trees that are in the memorial. And even though it seems like that local person doesn't really like the tourists come to visit, he says this memorial is about sadness and remembrance, but it's also about having life come back to the city, and that the trees symbolize that. So not everybody dislikes the crowd. Some people are excited to see the people coming back, and that life is returning to New York City and to the site of the memorial. So the author quotes one of the designers to remind readers of the purpose. Well, really the purpose is, right? Because it's to remember, but also to bring life. So more than one purpose. So that is an example of what looking at an author is doing with language might look like. So there are you can see where I'm using verbs. The author quotes. The author includes details. The author includes a visual. The author illustrates. And it's always going to be a verb, right? Because when you're doing something, it's a verb. So when you're describing what an author is doing, you should be using a verb. And I'm going to include in the Schoology a list of verbs that you can look at, is the author analyzing, is the author arguing, is the author asking. And that's going to be a resource that you'll be able to use as you just try and analyze and decide what authors are doing. So now you're going to go back into the Schoology course, and there's going to be a quiz, how exciting for you, over the article.